Rich man kicks a 4-year-old girl's crutch, but the horse saw it all and does this. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The icy June wind sliced through the streets of Harmony Creek like invisible blades, carrying the scent of damp earth and the promise of more rain. In the town square of the small Appalachian town, where the trees had already shed most of their leaves, a small, fragile figure moved with difficulty among the empty benches. Lucy was only 4 years old, but her eyes carried a weight that shouldn't exist in a child. Her left leg, marked by a deformity she had had since birth, forced her to rely on a rough wooden crutch. The piece of branch had been carefully sanded and adjusted by loving hands that were no longer there to support her. The girl walked slowly, her steps echoing faintly on the wet pavement. The torn coat she wore barely protected her from the cold that penetrated to her bones. Her tangled, dirty brown hair stuck to her pale face as she searched for any scraps of food someone might have dropped. Across the square, Mr. Abernathy checked the gold watch on his wrist for the 3rd time in 2 minutes. At 52 years old, he was known throughout Harmony Creek as the owner of the biggest hardware store in the region. His rigid posture and well-cut suit contrasted with the haste he showed as he walked toward the First National Bank. The businessman was late for a crucial meeting with investors from Charleston. His cell phone wouldn't stop ringing, and with each missed call his irritation grew. Mr. Abernathy didn't have time for anything other than his business, especially not to pay attention to an abandoned child who frequented the square. Lucy had stopped near a trash can, where she spotted a piece of bread someone had thrown away. She bent down carefully, supporting all her weight on the crutch when she heard hurried footsteps approaching. Instinctively, the girl cowered, preparing for another rejection or harsh word. Mr. Abernathy was walking quickly, the phone glued to his ear, when he saw the child crouched right in his path. The irritation he felt about the day's problems found an easy target. Without even looking properly at the girl's face, he kicked the crutch with unnecessary force. The sound of the branch breaking echoed through the empty square like a gunshot. Lucy lost her balance instantly, her small body collapsing onto the wet, cold ground. The pain that shot through her deformed leg was so intense that she couldn't even scream. Only a low, muffled groan escaped her lips. Mr. Abernathy didn't even turn to see the result of his action. He kept walking, muttering about people who got in other people's way. To him, it had been just a small obstacle removed from his path. But someone had witnessed everything. A few yards away, grazing peacefully near the trees in the square, a white horse raised its head. The animal, which used to roam freely around the town without a known owner, had watched the whole scene carefully. Its dark eyes gleamed with something that seemed like understanding. Lucy was trying to get up on her own, her small hands searching for support on the slippery ground. Silent tears ran down her face as she fought against the pain radiating from her leg. The broken pieces of the crutch lay beside her, useless. That's when a white shadow approached. The horse walked towards her with careful steps, as if understanding the fragility of the situation. It lowered its large head close to the girl's face, its eyes conveying a kindness she hadn't seen anywhere in a long time. Lucy looked at the animal, surprised. She had never been so close to a horse, but something about its presence reassured her. Hesitantly, she reached out her small hand and touched its soft muzzle. The horse remained still, allowing the contact. With slow movements, the animal positioned itself next to the girl, lowering itself slightly. Lucy understood the silent offer. Leaning on the horse's strong back, she managed to stand up again. Her leg hurt terribly, and she knew she wouldn't be able to walk without support. But there was that gentle being, offering its strength. The girl put her arm around the horse's neck, and together they moved slowly through the square, Across the street, Mr. Abernathy had stopped in front of the bank, waiting for them to open the doors. Something made him look back, and he saw the strange scene of the child, walking supported by the white horse. For a moment, a strange sensation went through his chest, as if he had seen that before, as if that image meant something important. But the moment passed quickly. The bank opened, and Mr. Abernathy went inside, pushing away any thoughts about the girl. He had business to take care of, money to earn. There was no time for sentimentality. Lucy and the horse walked away from the square together, she limping heavily alongside the animal that had become, in that moment of despair, her only source of kindness in the world. The cold continued to be cutting. Hunger still gnawed at her empty stomach, and the pain in her legs seemed to worsen with each step. But for the first time in months, since she had woken up alone in that abandoned warehouse without finding her mother, Lucy didn't feel completely lost. The white horse walked patiently beside her, as if it had all the time in the world to take care of a wounded girl that no one else wanted. As they disappeared through the narrow streets of Harmony Creek, neither the girl nor the man who had hurt her imagined how their destinies were intertwined by invisible threads that time and circumstance would soon reveal in a devastating way. The weeks following the encounter in the square brought a strange and silent routine to Lucy. Every morning, when the sun still struggled to break through the heavy clouds of the Appalachian winter, she woke up in the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, always with the same knot in her stomach, caused by constant hunger. The white horse had become her faithful shadow. It always appeared at the right time, as if it possessed a supernatural instinct to detect when she needed help most. The girl had stopped questioning about the animal's origin or why it followed her. In her small, painful world, that companionship was the only gift that life had offered her. Without the crutch, walking had become a daily torture. Lucy leaned on walls, poles, benches, anything that could support her weight when her deformed leg gave way. But whenever the situation became desperate, when the pain made her collapse on the ground, the horse appeared out of nowhere. The animal had developed its own language with her. A low neigh meant it was time to move to another place. A gentle headbutt indicated that it had found clean water in some fountain. When it positioned itself between Lucy and anyone who approached, she knew she should be alert. On that particularly cold Thursday, Lucy was trying to reach some berries that had fallen from a tree in the backyard of an abandoned house when she felt her legs weaken. The hunger of the last 3 days had taken its toll. Her vision began to blur, and she felt her body collapsing. The horse, which was grazing nearby, galloped to her before she hit the ground. It positioned itself so that she fell supported on its flank, softening the impact. It remained still for long minutes, allowing the girl to recover her strength, its warm breath warming her pale face. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Mr. Abernathy faced his own storm. Sitting at his mahogany desk in the hardware store, he stared at a stack of documents that seemed to scream betrayal. His partner of 15 years, Robert Fowler, had disappeared overnight, taking all the company's money with him. The bank accounts were empty. The suppliers called non-stop demanding overdue payments. The employees whispered through the halls, sensing that something terrible was happening. Mr. Abernathy clenched his fists until his nails dug into the palms of his hands, feeling his empire, built over decades, crumble like a house of cards. His wife, Eleanor, had discovered everything the previous morning. The discussion had been violent, with accusations flying through the air like shrapnel. She had called him arrogant, cruel, a heartless man who was finally getting what he deserved. The words had hurt more than any punch. His adult children, Michael and Ashley, had only called to communicate that they didn't want to talk to him anymore. Michael had been direct. "Dad, you've always been a hard man, but now we've discovered that you're simply evil. We don't want to have your last name associated with ours anymore." Mr. Abernathy knew that his reputation as an inflexible man in business had turned into something much worse over the years. How many people had he humiliated? How many families had he harmed with his cruel decisions? The girl in the square came back to his mind like an uncomfortable shadow. That afternoon, unable to bear the oppressive silence of his office, Mr. Abernathy went out for a walk. His steps led him naturally to the town square, where he had committed that act of gratuitous cruelty weeks before. It was there that he felt superior, observing people he considered inferior. That's when he saw Lucy again. The girl was sitting on the ground, leaning against a tree, with the white horse lying beside her like a guardian. She was trying to eat something that seemed to be just breadcrumbs, chewing slowly, as if she wanted to make it last forever. Her clothes were even dirtier and more torn than the first time. Mr. Abernathy watched the scene from afar, hidden behind a lamppost. There was something in the child's posture that disturbed him deeply, the way she bent over the food, protecting it with her small body, the way the horse watched carefully any movement around. That wasn't normal. Suddenly, a group of older boys appeared running through the square. When they saw Lucy, they started laughing and making nasty comments about her condition. One of them kicked dirt in her direction, further dirtying her meager food. The horse stood up immediately, positioning itself between the boys and Lucy. Its ears went back, and it emitted a deep warning sound. The boys backed away but continued laughing and making obscene gestures. Lucy didn't react. She just cowered further against the tree, hugging her knees. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't ask for help. Her resignation was absolute, as if she had already learned that the world was cruel and not worth fighting against. Mr. Abernathy felt something strange in his chest, a pang of, what? Remorse? Impossible. He didn't regret anything. But the image of the helpless girl stirred something deep in his memory, something he preferred to keep buried. The boys finally got tired and left. The horse relaxed, returning to lie down next to Lucy. She reached out her small hand and stroked the animal's neck, as if thanking it for the protection. The gesture was so simple, so pure, that Mr. Abernathy felt a lump in his throat. As he walked back home, Mr. Abernathy couldn't get that scene out of his head. The child was clearly abandoned, living on the streets like a wild animal. But why did that bother him so much? He had spent his entire life ignoring other people's misery, focused only on his own interests. He arrived at the luxurious apartment where he lived with Eleanor to find it empty. She had fulfilled her threat and left, taking only her clothes and jewelry. She had left a cold note on the kitchen table. I can no longer live with a man who has lost his soul. Don't look for me. Mr. Abernathy crumpled the paper tightly, but he couldn't crumple the truth it contained. His cruelty had driven away everyone around him. Now, facing financial ruin and family abandonment, he was beginning to realize the price of a life dedicated only to his own success. That night, alone in his now empty apartment, Mr. Abernathy went to the window that overlooked the town square. Even in the darkness, he could distinguish two silhouettes near the tree where he had seen Lucy during the day. The girl and the horse were still there, facing the cold night without adequate shelter. A lonely tear ran down Mr. Abernathy's face. It wasn't pity for the child he felt, but a terrible understanding that his own loneliness was a direct consequence of his choices. He had built a world where only he mattered, and now he discovered that such a world was, in fact, an empty world. Outside, Lucy snuggled against the horse, seeking warmth. The animal extended one of its legs, creating a small shelter with its body. The two had found in each other the family that fate had denied them, united by pain and the need to survive in a world that seemed to have forgotten about compassion. The winter promised to be long, and the challenges that were approaching would test them all in ways they could not yet imagine. The rain started on Monday, a fine drizzle that gradually turned into a downpour. Lucy woke up in the abandoned warehouse, with water dripping through the broken tiles, forming puddles around the old mattress where she slept. The cold penetrated her bones like ice needles. The white horse was restless that morning. It walked back and forth at the entrance of the warehouse, neighing softly, as if sensing some danger. Lucy tried to get up to calm it, but her legs trembled violently. The fever had arrived during the night, bringing with it chills that made her teeth chatter uncontrollably. That's when the city workers arrived. Lucy heard the voices before she saw them. There were 3 men with yellow hard hats and clipboards, accompanied by a tractor that was coming right behind. The noise of the diesel engine echoed through the empty streets of the morning, announcing the destruction that was to come. "This is it," said one of them, consulting the papers. "This warehouse has to be demolished today. Order from the Department of Public Works." The horse positioned itself in front of the entrance, as if wanting to protect the only home that Lucy knew. The girl, trembling with fever and fear, managed to crawl to a broken window to watch what was happening. Her eyes burned, and her head throbbed as if it were about to explode. The men discussed for a few minutes about how to proceed. One of them noticed the signs that someone had been living there, the old mattress, some water containers, food scraps, but they concluded that it was some homeless person who had already moved on. Lucy watched helplessly as the tractor began to tear down the side walls of the warehouse. Each hit of the machine made the ground tremble beneath her feet. The horse neighed loudly, agitated by the violence of the destruction. The girl knew she had only a few minutes before they reached the part where she was hiding. With the little strength she had left, Lucy managed to get out through the back window. The horse followed her immediately, positioning itself beside her to offer support. Together, they moved away from the warehouse as the noise of the demolition echoed behind them like the roar of a hungry beast. The fever worsened with each step. Lucy felt like she was walking inside a bad dream, where the familiar streets turned into confusing labyrinths. The horse guided her patiently, stopping whenever she needed to rest, offering its body as support when her legs failed. For 3 days, they wandered through the town looking for shelter. Lucy slept under awnings in public squares, anywhere that offered minimal protection from the incessant rain. The horse never strayed, standing guard while she tried to regain her strength. On the 4th night, the situation became desperate. The fever had risen so high that Lucy began to hallucinate, calling for a mother who wouldn't come, mumbling disconnected words amidst the tremors. The horse was visibly distressed, walking in circles around the girl, neighing softly as if asking for help from someone who didn't exist. That's when Betty Sullivan appeared in their lives like an angel in the early morning. The 67-year-old woman had worked as a cleaner at the town market since she was 15 years old. Every day, she arrived at 4 in the morning to prepare the establishment before opening. On that Thursday, walking down Main Street with her bag of cloths and cleaning products, she heard a strange sound coming from an awning. Betty approached and found a scene that broke her heart. A small girl, clearly sick, trembled violently under wet newspapers, while a white horse tried to protect her from the rain with its own body. The child muttered incomprehensible things, lost in the midst of a high fever. "Good heavens," murmured Betty, kneeling beside Lucy. She touched the girl's forehead and was startled by the heat radiating from her. "This child is burning up." The horse watched the strangers approach cautiously, but something in Betty's gentle posture seemed to reassure it. When she reached out to caress Lucy, the animal didn't interfere. Betty didn't hesitate. She knew she didn't have much money, that she could barely support herself with her cleaning salary, that her house was small and simple. But she also knew that she couldn't let a child die of cold and disease on the street while she had the strength to help. "Come on, little one," she whispered, wrapping Lucy in her own coat. "You're coming with me. I can't leave you here like this." Lucy opened her eyes briefly, seeing Betty's kind face through the haze of the fever. It was the first gentle face she had seen in so long that she almost believed she was dreaming. She tried to speak, but only a low groan came out of her throat. Betty carried the girl in her arms, impressed with how little she weighed. It was like carrying an injured bird. The horse followed them through the narrow streets of Harmony Creek, its hooves echoing on the wet pavement of the early morning. Betty's house was in a simple neighborhood, far from the town center. It was a small building with 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a tiny kitchen. Nothing luxurious, but clean and organized, smelling of flowers and homemade soap. Betty laid Lucy on her own bed, covering her with all the blankets she had. The girl continued to hallucinate, calling for Mom and Grandpa, names that came from her lips like desperate prayers. The fever was so high that Betty feared the worst. Throughout the early morning she made cold compresses, forced small sips of warm tea between the girl's parched lips, prayed softly while watching each difficult breath. The horse remained in the backyard, where Betty had left the door open so that it could come in if it wanted. As the sun rose, the fever finally began to subside. Lucy opened her eyes for the first time in hours, finding Betty's worried gaze. The woman smiled, tears of relief springing to her tired eyes. "Thank God," murmured Betty. "I thought I was going to lose you, child." Lucy tried to speak, but discovered that her voice had disappeared completely. She could only emit hoarse, incomprehensible sounds. The trauma, the illness, and the suffering had taken away her ability to communicate with words. Betty immediately realized that something was wrong. She tried to ask simple questions. What was her name? Where did she live? Where were her parents? But Lucy only looked at her with big, frightened eyes, moving her lips without being able to produce any sound. "Can't you talk, poor thing?" said Betty with infinite tenderness. "That's okay. We'll take care of that too. For now, you're safe here." It was at this moment that Betty noticed the deformity in Lucy's leg. The girl tried to get up to go to the bathroom, but collapsed on the floor, unable to support her own weight without support. Betty then understood the extent of that child's suffering. From the yard, the horse watched everything through the open door. Its intelligent eyes seemed to assess whether Betty was really trustworthy, whether that place would be safe for the girl it had sworn to protect. Gradually, it approached the door, sniffing the air, testing the limits of that new territory. Betty reached out to the animal, offering a piece of bread. The horse hesitated for a moment, then accepted the food delicately. In that simple gesture, a silent truce was established between the woman and the 4-legged guardian. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Mr. Abernathy woke up alone in his mansion that now seemed like an empty mausoleum. The expensive furniture couldn't fill the void left by the family that had abandoned him. He went to the window overlooking the town square, unconsciously looking for the girl and the horse that had become a constant presence in his thoughts. But the tree where they used to stay was empty. For some reason he couldn't explain, this made him uneasy. Where could that child be? Was she okay? Why did he care? Mr. Abernathy pushed those thoughts away, annoyed with himself. He had bigger problems to solve. The impending bankruptcy, the lawsuits piling up, the need to sell the house to pay off the debts. There was no time to worry about any street girl. But throughout that day, while dealing with lawyers and creditors, the image of the empty tree didn't leave his mind. Something had changed, and he couldn't help but feel that this change was important in a way he didn't yet understand. The first weeks in Betty's house passed like a confusing fog for Lucy. The girl woke up several times during the night, frightened, looking for the warehouse that no longer existed. Betty was always there, with soft words and gentle hands, helping her to distinguish between nightmares and reality. The horse had established its own routine. During the day, it wandered around the house, grazing in the vacant lot next door, but always returned to the yard when the sun began to set. Betty had improvised a shelter with old wood and plastic tarps, creating a space where the animal could protect itself from the rain. Lucy spent hours watching the horse from the kitchen window. Betty noticed how the girl's eyes lit up whenever the animal appeared in her field of vision. It was as if that silent being was her only connection to a world she could understand. The absence of speech worried Betty deeply. She tried in every way to stimulate Lucy to make some sound, showing objects, asking simple questions, singing lullabies. But the girl only moved her lips silently, her eyes conveying a growing frustration with her own inability. It was during a rainy afternoon in August that Betty made a disturbing discovery. While bathing Lucy, she noticed strange marks on her small body. They weren't recent injuries, but old scars that told a story of abandonment and neglect that went far beyond life on the streets. "Who did this to you, sweetheart?" murmured Betty, gently touching a mark on the girl's arm. Lucy recoiled immediately, her eyes filling with fear, as if the memories themselves were too dangerous to be revisited. Betty understood that she couldn't force anything. Whatever had happened to Lucy before she appeared on the streets of Harmony Creek had been traumatic enough to steal her voice and her trust in the adult world. Patience would be her only weapon against the demons that haunted the child. Meanwhile, Mr. Abernathy's situation continued to deteriorate rapidly. His company had closed permanently. The employees were fired without receiving their severance pay, and the lawsuits piled up on his desk like an unstoppable avalanche. The mansion where he had lived for 15 years had a "for sale" sign, but no one showed any real interest in buying it for the price he needed. Mr. Abernathy had moved to a small apartment in the town centre, carrying only the essentials. The contrast between his previous life and the current reality was brutal. Where he once had a maid, now he needed to learn to cook for himself. Where he once drove a BMW, now he walked on foot through the streets he used to dominate. The social fall was painful, but the worst part was the isolation. Old friends avoided him, fearing being associated with his bankruptcy. Acquaintances turned their faces when they met him on the street. Mr. Abernathy discovered that his relationships had been built on the fragile foundation of financial success, and without it, nothing remained. It was during one of these solitary walks that he returned to the town square. He had developed the morbid habit of frequenting the place where he had committed that act of cruelty, as if the memory of the injured girl was the only weight he could still feel in his numb chest. That day, he saw something that disturbed him. Betty was sitting on a bench in the square, with Lucy by her side. The girl wore clean clothes and a new coat. Her hair was combed and shiny. But what caught Mr. Abernathy's attention the most was the presence of the white horse, grazing peacefully near the bench like a silent guardian. Mr. Abernathy hid behind a tree, watching the scene. Betty was trying to teach Lucy to use a new crutch, made of well-crafted wood and with padded support. The girl made hesitant attempts, always leaning on the horse when she lost her balance. There was something in that image that deeply moved Mr. Abernathy. Betty's infinite patience, the girl's silent determination, the horse's protective presence. It was like observing a strange but genuine family, united not by blood, but by the mutual need for care and protection. When Lucy finally managed to take a few steps without falling, Betty applauded with genuine joy. The horse neighed softly, as if also celebrating the small victory. Lucy smiled for the first time Mr. Abernathy could remember, a shy but real smile that completely transformed her pale face. At that moment, an old memory emerged in Mr. Abernathy's mind like a violent wave. He saw himself at 12 years old, teaching his younger sister, Carol, to ride a bike in the backyard of the family home. She was only 6 years old, and her determination to learn, even falling several times, had impressed her older brother. Carol had a birthmark on her neck, a small crescent-shaped sign that was always visible when she tied her hair up. Mr. Abernathy remembered how she used to touch it when she was nervous, an unconscious gesture that the blood froze in his veins. Mr. Abernathy forced his eyes to focus on Lucy, who was now sitting on the bench next to Betty. When the girl turned her head to watch a pigeon that had landed near the horse, Mr. Abernathy could clearly see the right side of her neck. There was the mark, the same crescent-shaped birthmark that his sister Carol possessed. Mr. Abernathy's legs failed, and he had to lean on the tree to avoid falling. The revelation hit him like lightning, making all the pieces of a terrible puzzle fit together in his mind. Carol had become pregnant at 17 by a boy the family considered unsuitable. Mr. Abernathy's father, a rigid and proud man, had kicked his daughter out of the house, calling her a shame to the family. Mr. Abernathy, then 25 years old and already obsessed with his own social ascension, had supported his father's decision. She made her choice, he had said at the time. Now let her deal with the consequences. Carol had disappeared from Harmony Creek that same week, and they never heard from her again. The years passed. Mr. Abernathy built his empire, married, had children, and gradually erased his sister from his memory as if she had never existed. But now, watching that 4-year-old girl with the familiar mark on her neck, Mr. Abernathy understood the devastating truth. Lucy wasn't just any abandoned child. She was his niece, daughter of the sister he had rejected and forgotten, and he, the uncle who should have protected the girl, had been the man who broke her crutch and threw her to the ground in a moment of gratuitous cruelty. The irony was so cruel that Mr. Abernathy felt a bitter taste rise in his throat. All his recent misfortunes, his partner's betrayal, his family's abandonment, his bankruptcy, now seemed like consequences of an unrelenting cosmic justice. He had sown seeds of cruelty throughout his life, and now he was reaping the bitter fruits of that planting. Lucy was living proof of how his hardness of heart had destroyed not only his own family, but also condemned an innocent child to abandonment and suffering. The girl he had hurt in the square was his own blood, and he hadn't even been able to recognize her. Mr. Abernathy remained hidden behind the tree until Betty and Lucy left, the horse following them patiently. When finally alone in the square, he let himself fall onto the bench where they had been sitting, burying his face in his hands. For the first time in decades, Mr. Abernathy cried. He cried for the sister he had abandoned, for the niece he had hurt, for the family he had lost through his own arrogance. He cried for the cruel man he had become and for the chances of redemption he had wasted throughout his life. The sun set over Harmony Creek, tinting the sky red like blood, and Mr. Abernathy remained alone in the square, facing for the first time the real weight of his choices. Destiny had placed his niece in his path twice, and on both occasions he had failed miserably to recognize the blood tie that united them. Now, it remained to be discovered if there was still time for a third chance, and if he would have enough courage to try to redeem himself from a lifetime of cruelty. For 3 days, Mr. Abernathy couldn't leave his apartment. The discovery that Lucy was his niece had shaken the foundations of his reality. He walked through the small apartment like a ghost, reliving every moment of cruelty in his life, every selfish choice he had made. The refrigerator was almost empty, but he didn't feel hungry. The phone rang insistently. Creditors, lawyers, people demanding debts. But he didn't answer. None of that seemed important in the face of the magnitude of his guilt. He had hurt his own niece, the daughter of the sister he had kicked out of his house years before. On Thursday morning, Mr. Abernathy finally left his apartment. His steps led him automatically to Betty's house. He had found out where she lived by asking discreetly at the town market, pretending to be an old acquaintance. Now, standing across the street, he watched the simple house with clean windows and a small garden in front. The white horse was in the yard, grazing peacefully. Mr. Abernathy felt a pang of bitter irony as he realized that even that animal had shown more compassion for Lucy than he himself. That's when he saw Betty leave the house in a hurry, carrying a shopping bag. She seemed agitated, worried. Mr. Abernathy followed her at a safe distance, watching as she walked quickly towards the pharmacy in the center. At the pharmacy, Betty spoke in a low voice with the pharmacist, showing a prescription. Mr. Abernathy managed to hear fragments of the conversation. Child can't talk. Very deep trauma. Medication for anxiety. Mr. Abernathy's heart squeezed. Lucy was suffering so much that she needed medication, and he was one of the main causes of that suffering. Betty left the pharmacy with a small bottle of medicine and an expression of deep concern. Mr. Abernathy followed her back to the house, where he positioned himself again across the street, watching. Through the living room window, he could see Lucy sitting on the floor, playing silently with some colourful objects that Betty had improvised as toys. The girl moved slowly, her deformed leg clearly causing discomfort. But what hurt Mr. Abernathy the most was the empty expression on her face. There was no joy, no childish curiosity, just a resignation that shouldn't exist in a 4-year-old child. That afternoon, Betty left again, this time leaving Lucy alone for a few minutes. Mr. Abernathy saw his chance and crossed the street, approaching the front window. Lucy was trying to reach a glass of water on the low table in the living room, but her leg didn't allow her to stretch enough. The girl tried to get up, leaning on her new crutch, but lost her balance and fell. Mr. Abernathy saw when she tried to get up on her own, her small arms trembling with the effort. Silent tears ran down her face, and Mr. Abernathy realized that even to cry, Lucy had learned not to make a sound. Something inside him broke completely. Abernathy knocked gently on the door. Lucy looked in his direction, still on the floor, her eyes widening in fear at the sight of a stranger. He opened the door slowly, speaking in a low, calm voice. "Don't be afraid," he said, kneeling on the floor to be at the girl's height. "I just want to help." Lucy cowered against the wall, her eyes fixed on Mr. Abernathy. There was something familiar about that face, but she couldn't identify what it was. Mr. Abernathy reached out slowly, picked up the glass of water and offered it to her. "You were trying to get this, weren't you?" Lucy hesitated for a moment, then accepted the glass with her 2 small hands. She drank the water in small sips, without taking her eyes off Mr. Abernathy. He noticed how her hands trembled, not from physical weakness, but from constant fear. "Did you get hurt when you fell?" asked Mr. Abernathy, his voice choked with emotion. Lucy just looked at him, moving her lips silently. The frustration in her eyes was evident. She wanted to speak, but the words simply wouldn't come out. Mr. Abernathy felt tears spring to his eyes. "I know who you are," he whispered. "You are Carol's daughter, aren't you? Your mother, she's my sister." Upon hearing her mother's name, Lucy had an immediate reaction. Her eyes filled with tears, and she stretched out her arms towards Mr. Abernathy, as if begging for news of Carol. The gesture broke his heart into pieces. "Your mother—" Mr. Abernathy swallowed hard, struggling to find the words. "She's not here anymore, little one, but I'm here now. I'm your Uncle Abernathy." Lucy threw herself into Mr. Abernathy's arms, clinging to him with a desperate force. She cried silently, her small body trembling with sobs that produced no sound. Mr. Abernathy hugged her carefully, feeling how fragile and too light she was for a 4-year-old child. "Forgive me," he murmured, stroking the girl's hair. "Forgive me for taking so long to find you. Forgive me for being so blind, so cruel." It was at this moment that Betty arrived home. The woman stopped in the doorway of the living room, shocked to find a stranger hugging Lucy. Her first reaction was protective. She dropped the groceries and approached quickly. "What are you doing here?" "Who are you?" Mr. Abernathy got up slowly, still holding Lucy in his arms. The girl clung to him as if he were a lifeline, reluctant to let go. "My name is Mr. Abernathy," he said, his voice laden with emotion. I am her uncle." Betty frowned, suspicious. "Uncle? What uncle?" This girl was abandoned on the street, almost dead from hunger and disease. Where was her family until now? The accusation hit Mr. Abernathy head-on because it was absolutely true. "You're right," he admitted. I failed her. I failed in a terrible way, but now I want to make up for it if you allow me." "How can I trust you?" questioned Betty, still watchful. "Anyone can show up here saying they're her relative." Mr. Abernathy pointed gently to Lucy's neck. "See a birthmark. It's identical to the one my sister Carol had. Lucy is Carol's daughter." Betty observed the mark, then looked at Mr. Abernathy's face. There was something in his expression, a genuine pain and a deep regret that made her hesitate. "Even if that's true," she said slowly, "where were you when she needed you? Why are you only showing up now?" "Because I'm a man who has spent his entire life making terrible mistakes," replied Mr. Abernathy, his voice breaking. "I kicked my sister out of the house when she got pregnant. I never tried to find out what happened to her or to the child. I lived only for my own interests, without caring about anyone." Lucy had stopped crying and was watching the conversation between the adults, even without fully understanding what was being said. Her eyes went from Mr. Abernathy to Betty, as if trying to decipher whether that meant she would be abandoned again. "And in the square," continued Mr. Abernathy, the guilt weighing on his voice, "I was the man who broke her crutch. I hurt her, without even knowing who she was. I am directly responsible for the suffering she went through." Betty recoiled, shocked. "You were the one who did that to her." "It was," admitted Mr. Abernathy, unable to look directly at Betty. "And now I've discovered that I hurt my own niece. Life has shown me how terrible I am, destroying everything around me with my cruelty." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Lucy stirred in Mr. Abernathy's arms, and he gently put her back on the floor. The girls stood between the two adults, looking from one to the other. "What do you want?" asked Betty finally. "I want to take care of her," said Mr. Abernathy. "I want to give her everything my family should have given from the beginning. Medical treatment, education, affection. I want to make up for all the mistakes I've made." Betty watched Lucy, who had reached out her small hand to touch Mr. Abernathy's arm gently. There was something in the child's reaction that suggested recognition, a connection that went beyond words. "This child lost her voice because of the traumas she suffered," said Betty. "She needs special care, infinite patience. She needs genuine love, not guilt or pity." "I know," replied Mr. Abernathy, "and I know that I don't deserve a second chance. But she deserves to have a family, even if it's an imperfect family like me." At that moment, the white horse appeared in the back door, as if it felt that something important was happening. Its intelligent eyes observed the scene, focusing especially on Mr. Abernathy. For a few seconds, man and animal stared at each other, as if the horse was evaluating the intentions of that stranger who held its protégé. Lucy noticed the horse's presence and walked to it, leaning on her crutch. The animal lowered its head to receive the girl's affection, but its eyes remained fixed on Mr. Abernathy. "Even the horse protects her better than I do," murmured Mr. Abernathy, recognizing the irony of the situation. Betty sighed deeply. "If you really want to help this girl, you're going to have to prove you've changed. You're going to have to show that you can be the family she needs, not just someone trying to ease their own conscience." "How can I prove that?" asked Mr. Abernathy. "Starting slowly," replied Betty. "Visiting her, gaining her trust, helping with the care she needs, and mainly understanding that I'm not going to let anyone hurt her again." Mr. Abernathy nodded, understanding that this would be his last chance at redemption. Lucy watched him from the side of the horse, her big eyes still filled with uncertainty, but also with a shy hope that was beginning to sprout. The weight of the truth had fallen on all of them, and now it remained to be discovered whether it would be possible to build something new from the wreckage of the past. The months that followed brought a gradual and profound transformation for everyone. Mr. Abernathy began to visit Betty's house every day, always with humility, always asking permission to enter. In the beginning, Lucy hid behind the horse when he arrived, but gradually she accepted his presence. Mr. Abernathy had sold his last valuable possessions, an old watch he had inherited from his father, some expensive paintings that decorated his apartment, even his wedding ring. All the money was invested in Lucy's treatment. He hired a physical therapist specializing in children, a speech therapist to help with her muteness, and provided all the necessary medical exams. The first big victory came when Lucy managed to take 10 consecutive steps without the crutch, relying only on the horse. It was a September afternoon, and the spring sun streamed through the windows of Betty's house, creating a warm and hopeful environment. Mr. Abernathy was kneeling at the end of the room with open arms, encouraging the girl. "Come on, Lucy," he said softly. "I know you can do it." The horse positioned itself strategically next to the girl, offering support if she needed it. Lucy looked at Mr. Abernathy, then at Betty, who smiled encouragingly from the sofa. She took a deep breath and took the first step, then the second, the third. When she finally reached Mr. Abernathy and threw herself into his arms, Betty couldn't hold back the tears. It was the first time she had seen the girl show genuine joy since she had found her on that cold, early morning. But the greatest transformation was happening within Mr. Abernathy himself. The man who had spent decades focused only on accumulating wealth now found purpose in small gestures, combing Lucy's hair, reading stories to her before bed, teaching her simple words through drawings. The speech therapist had explained that Lucy's muteness was the result of emotional trauma, not physical impairment. "With patience and much love, she can recover her speech completely," she had said. "But it can't be forced. It has to happen naturally." During the physical therapy sessions, Mr. Abernathy was always present, holding Lucy's hand when the exercises caused pain, wiping her tears, whispering words of encouragement. The horse had also become part of the treatment. The physical therapist discovered that the exercises were more effective when Lucy leaned on the animal. Betty's health, however, began to worry them. The stress of caring alone for a traumatized child had taken its toll. She had fainted twice in the last month, and the doctor had been clear. She needed rest and fewer worries. That's when Mr. Abernathy made a decision that surprised everyone. "Betty," he said one October afternoon, while they watched Lucy play in the yard with the horse, "I want you to come live with me." Betty looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "My apartment is small, but it has 2 bedrooms. You can live there without paying anything, and we can take care of Lucy together. You would be like the grandmother she never had." The proposal was tempting, but Betty hesitated. "What about the horse? I can't leave him. He's Lucy's family too." Mr. Abernathy smiled, the first genuinely happy expression he had shown in months. "The building has a small patio in the back. I've already talked to the building manager. They've agreed that the horse can stay there as long as we take care of all his needs." The move happened in November. Mr. Abernathy, Betty, Lucy and the horse formed an unconventional family, but united by ties that went far beyond blood. The small apartment became cramped, but it was full of life for the first time in years. Mr. Abernathy had completely lost his fortune, but discovered a wealth he never knew existed. He worked as a salesman in a hardware store, ironically, for a competitor he had once despised. The salary was low, but enough to support his new family. Winter arrived again, but this time it was different. Lucy wasn't cold, she wasn't hungry, she wasn't alone. She had gained a few pounds and her hair shone with health. She still didn't speak, but her eyes had recovered the light of childhood. The horse adapted well to the building's patio. The neighbors, initially skeptical, were won over by the animal's docility and the obvious affection it showed for the girl. Some children from the building started visiting it, and Lucy made her first friends. It was on Christmas Eve that the miracle everyone had been waiting for happened. Mr. Abernathy had bought a simple doll for Lucy, using part of his first paycheck. When she opened the gift, her eyes sparkled with joy. She hugged the doll to her chest, swaying with happiness. Betty was in the kitchen preparing the modest Christmas dinner they had planned. The horse watched everything from the patio through the window. Mr. Abernathy was kneeling beside Lucy, smiling as he watched her joy, and then, suddenly, she spoke. "Uncle." The word came out low, hesitant, but clear. Mr. Abernathy stopped breathing for a moment, thinking he had imagined it. Lucy looked him directly in the eyes and repeated, "Uncle Abernathy." Betty dropped the spoon she was holding in the kitchen. The sound of metal against the floor echoed through the apartment, but no one moved. Everyone was focused on that magical moment. You spoke," whispered Mr. Abernathy, tears running freely down his face. "You said my name." Lucy smiled, a radiant smile that lit up her whole face. "Uncle Abernathy," she repeated once more, and then threw herself into his arms. Mr. Abernathy hugged her as if she were made of crystal, sobbing unashamedly. Betty came running from the kitchen, her own tears mingling with laughter of joy. From the patio, the horse neighed softly, as if also celebrating that special moment. "Say it again," asked Mr. Abernathy, his voice choked with emotion. "Uncle Abernathy," said Lucy, each word clearer than the last. "Grandma Betty." Betty fell to her knees beside them, wrapping the girl in her arms. "My dear, you're talking again." In the days that followed, Lucy's words returned like a flood. She asked questions about everything, laughed out loud, hummed songs that Betty taught her. It was as if an emotional dam had broken, releasing all the joy that had been trapped for months. The first complete sentence she said was, "Uncle Abernathy, where was my mommy?" Mr. Abernathy knelt down to her height, choosing his words carefully. "Your mommy had to leave, little one. But she loved you very much, and now you have a new family that loves you the same way." Lucy nodded, with the strange wisdom that some children possess. "And the horse is family too?" "Of course he is," replied Mr. Abernathy, looking at the animal that had shown more humanity than he himself. "He has always been your family." 6 months later, in June of the following year, Lucy ran through the patio without a crutch, playing with other children from the building. Her leg still made her limp slightly, but it no longer prevented her from being a normal, happy child. Mr. Abernathy watched from the window, still impressed with the transformation of them all. He had lost his fortune, his house, his social status, but he had gained something infinitely more valuable, a true family and the redemption of his soul. Betty approached him at the window, smiling. "Do you regret anything?" Mr. Abernathy reflected for a moment. "I regret taking so long to find you. I regret being cruel for so long, but I don't regret losing everything else, because that's what brought me here." From the patio, Lucy waved to them, shouting, "Uncle Abernathy, Grandma Betty, look, I managed to climb onto the horsey all by myself." They laughed, waving back. The white horse remained still, allowing the girl to play safely, its watchful eyes always attentive to any danger. Mr. Abernathy had learned that true wealth was not in the things you could buy, but in the people you chose to love. His niece, whom he almost destroyed with his cruelty, had become the most important teacher in his life, teaching him about forgiveness, hope, and second chances. And as the sun set over Harmony Creek, painting the sky golden, an improvised but genuine family gathered for another simple meal, surrounded by the love they had finally learned to give and receive. Spring had arrived not only for nature, but for their hearts, which had gone through a winter that was too long.